for solo RPGing, you don't necessarily even need to know what rules you're using or to even have a character in mind before the adventure gets set up. And in this regard, you're being more of the GM initially. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that um, sometimes an idea will come to me that I want a structure. I want to get a structure for an adventure and then figure out what rules I'm going to put on top of that structure and what characters I'm going to create. And I was thinking a lot about this World of Warcraft adventure game. I've done a video on this board game that's on my channel just as it plays. We're not going to be talking about that, but what I was thinking about is I wanted to look to the map for some ideas about what I might, maybe a little adventure I might create, and have that be my initial foundation for what's going to be happening. And just practically speaking, this is how the board comes out of the box. It's a really big board, as you may know if you know this game, and it's got some cool places and art. But just for filming's sake, for ease of filming, I'm decided I'm going to use this portion of the board. So I'm taking a look here at this town of Brill, and then there's the Undercity, and then there is this Scarlet Monastery, and then there's a valley here. So this is going to be my initial environment, let's say, and thinking about what adventure I'm going to be creating and what story I'm going to be creating. I'm going to start there. On top of that, I'm going to use another scaffolding apparatus, the Solo Adventurer's Guide. This is a publication by Guillermo Bento. He wrote to me, sent me an email about it, and he wanted not a video on it, but just my thoughts about it. So I asked him to send me the file, and then as I started looking through the file, I decided I really wanted to print it out myself and bind it up because I wanted to be able to show it to you, as I can't really show a PDF easily on the computer. So I'm going to be using this, integrating this. Now this is says that this is really for 5th edition. I'm not going to be using 5th edition here at all. In fact, I may go to the Holmes rules here. I'm not really sure, and this is my point. I want to show you how you can create a structure of a story and something happening first, and then maybe fill it with characters. Is taking this map as my inspiration, I see that we will be starting out in this hamlet or village of Brill and somehow needing to travel to the Undercity, which is obviously going to be a dangerous place, and perhaps get something there, find something there. We have a reason for going there and bringing that thing to this Scarlet Monastery. You can't quite see the name of it here at the top. Here we go. So this is a monastery here, and this is going to be our travels. Now, the valley here that is not directly connected, it's connected off camera here. This is looking to be, say, dangerous, a dangerous connection to the valley. Somehow, perhaps that is going to come into play as a perhaps a goal or something extra that we might get, something extra that's there. But just taking this as a suggestion, my sense is that something will be causing our party, and I think I'm going to have at least 2, maybe 3 characters. I'm feeling like 3 characters might be the way to go here, that we will need to be journeying from our safe haven into the Undercity to get something or do something or encounter something and bring it to this monastery. Maybe somebody is waiting for us. As you know, if you watch my channel enough, you know I often like to have another person joining the adventure at a certain point. So part of the goal might be to find the person there. Perhaps the person at the monastery is a priest or a cleric waiting for us. Perhaps we are more the adventuring sorts who are going to pick up this priest or cleric and somehow need this person to help us on this perilous journey to the valley, if that is our ultimate goal. I don't know. This is just a live demo in the sense that I'm talking through what I would be thinking about having made these decisions to focus on this map, but I'm definitely feeling the village of Brill as the place of origin for this story. I've decided this is this is one of my characters. Maybe I'm just going to start out with one character. This guy, this fighter, this lone fighter. This is from the Epic card game. This was sitting on my desk. I've been wanting to do a video on the solo variant of this, but I've just never gotten around to it. However, I'm looking around and I see it here and I decide this is my guy. So I might not start out with a party of adventurers. I might start out with this lone guy because I see here when I look at this and I see that this is going to be my character, I see this person standing alone. I see this person having perhaps survived an event that others did not. And since he's going to be coming from this village here, and this is my starting concept. There's going to be, this is a story. This perhaps was a village that was massacred or entered in some way by an enemy that caused the state of this to change to something where somebody was standing here like this. I don't know. This is what I'm going to work out, and I'm going to start to work it out using some of the suggestions from what I showed you earlier, the Solo Adventurer's Guide. Now, I have this printed and bound really so that I could show it to you in the video. You don't need to do that. You could very easily just keep it as the PDF, and there's one page in the back with the key tables, and I decided to actually have it laminated. That's how much I think I'm going to use it. So this is the core of the book here, but as mentioned, the guide talks about what solo D&D is, and really this could be substituted just solo RPGing. It's doesn't need to be D&D based. It could be these examples and commentary on creating a scene with a goal and a conflict. As mentioned, this is advice that you could find in many different places. It's presented here in a certain manner and concisely and I think effectively. So what we're going to do here is, again, we haven't even chosen a rule set, and if you're watching super carefully, you'll see this peeking out here is a character sheet from Basic Fantasy. This is an old character I used for something or other. I don't even know. I think Argoff was in a video. I think he was in my video on Basic Fantasy. I'm thinking now maybe I'm going to use Basic Fantasy. I still don't know for sure what rule set I'm going to use, and that's partially the point of this video because we already have, or at least I already have in my mind, a story of this lone warrior who has survived some cataclysmic event and is now going on a journey to do something. He's obviously going to have to deal with some conflicts in the journey. I think what I want him to do is to be seeking in the Undercity some type of magical item, perhaps, that the cleric lost or was stolen from the cleric by a thief. So there may be a thief that we're looking for in the Magic City that has something that we need that we then need to bring to the cleric for some reason. That's loosely what's forming in my mind. But again, back to the creation of the story and the opening scene. The concept here in this adventuring guide is maybe familiar to you from some other types of emulators. It has to do with creating a chaos level and modulating this chaos level up and down, and then depending on the chaos level, you will have doing something called the destiny check that is going to be guiding your the percentage answers to the yes and no questions that you're asking. If this sounds familiar to you from something like Mythic, yes, it is related, I think, in a way, but I find this pretty easy to easier in a way to understand. So, the chaos level, it's an indicator of your PC's control over events in the adventure. 1 to 9, 1 is the calmest, and 9 is the most chaotic imaginable. Normally, an adventure begins with a low or medium chaos level as you wish. Well, in our case, actually, the chaos level is pretty high because we're coming into the middle of a story where obviously there has been an event that has destroyed this village, and we have been the lone survivor in the village. So our chaos level is going to be relatively high at the beginning. I'm going to give it, say, a 7. So when we're initially rolling on this table, we're going to be rolling on the 7, and that will be a D10 that we will be rolling. Well, how does this work? I will show you an example from the book here. So what we're doing is we are choosing our chaos level, and we're going to go with a D7 here, excuse me, a 7 with a D10 for our example here. And we will be making a roll to see what happens with a basic question. Here's an example of how we might use this destiny check. We are going to ask a question. What is the likelihood that there is somebody else in this village surviving? We are going to say it's unlikely based on the circumstances that we know, and we already know that the chaos level is a 7, so we're going to be rolling a d10. So we do our roll, and we got an 8. So we refer to the chaos level here, and we look at the unlikely column, which is a +1 modifier. So an 8 plus 1 is going to give us a 9. And then we refer to the destiny check level here. And we see that we have met the condition of no because we're less than 11. And you can see here that there are a variety of other options, including the interesting option of, well, critical yes, critical no. That is perhaps expected, but we have here on a D20 natural 7, a neutral or positive event, and then on a D20 natural 13, a negative event. And there are some charts down here that you could then further roll on to explicate that. But in our case right here, we have gotten the answer level no, that there is no other survivor. To continue with this example, if we decide that once we determine there's no other survivor, we're going to leave and we're going to change the scene, we make another roll, and we make the chaos roll. We're still working with our D10 because our chaos level is 7. This is going to tell us whether or not the chaos level changes and what happens. So we take this, the D10, and we give it a roll. And we get a 6. So then we refer to this chart here and see that a 6 or a 15 is going to lead to a conjuration, create something in the scene. So what this would tell us narratively is, wait, not so soon. Not so soon are we leaving this area and having just things continue on as they were. There's going to be some type of change to the scene. And we can see a little more explanation here. When the dice are rolled, the conjuration spell creates something new in the scene. Revise the scene by adding some element that did not exist before. And in this case, the spell, it's not literally a spell. I think it's figuratively, meaning conceptually that something has changed. So were we deciding to leave this village of Brill right now, having determined that nobody else is here, wait, something is going to happen. And then, of course, it's up to us to determine what that next thing is. But that is, in a nutshell, that is the summary of what this is giving you. Additionally, as mentioned, there are positive and negative event focus things that will happen, and we'll see that playing out as we actually play through our scene. And so all of this is the apparatus that's going to enable you to move a story forward or move a story to the side or bring in a new element or banish an element even. It's all contained in these tables. Now, you'll recall that when we did our destiny check, we received a 9. Now, a 10 is a weak no, so a 9 is semi close to a weak no, and that combined with the indication that we've gotten that there has to be something new in the scene is going to lead me to go back to do another destiny check. And the question is, again, maybe is there something that we missed? Perhaps not a person. We asked, is there a surviving person? Is there something that we missed surviving here? And now I'm going to say, given what we've learned from the chaos roll and the destiny check, that it's perhaps very likely that there's something that we missed. I don't know what, but that there's something that we missed. So we will still be at our chaos level of 7 here. We're taking our D10, and we're going to say it's very likely that there's something that we missed. And here we see the modifier is a +8. Well, you know what? Let's just say likely. We'll give it a little more risk. So we'll give it a roll we're still on the D10, we'll give it a roll, and we rolled a 6. We're on the likely, so 6 plus 7 is 13. And a 13 is going to be a yes. So you can see now how we would be directed to perhaps go back to the village, look around, not for a person, perhaps, as we said, but for something else. And then we could continue along in that direction. So we've demonstrated now how the use of these charts are going to help us with the story and moving the story forward. At this stage, we have the beginning of a conflict of a story for this fellow, and we still haven't built his character yet. We're just basing it on this visual, and I think I have committed to going with basic fantasy for this example. I started, well, two things. I started to map out the overall concepts that we have in terms of the locales and what the idea, what the theme, what the feeling of each place would be. So we're starting in the village. It's calm, but it is destroyed. And in some capacity, we're going to be traveling through these three spaces. I think my concept was to go to the city first. That's going to be dangerous and risky. And the monastery is going to be something of a haven. And our goal is that perhaps there is something at this monastery that we need to get or to bring to prevent further destruction of our city, and that this is the locus of operations of our story, as it were. I've also noted, you'll see here just in quotes to kind of designate the iconic nature of an NPC we might find there, or perhaps our party is spread out among these places. If you watch my other videos, you know that I often like to have members of my party being split up at the beginning of an adventure such that they are inherent to the goal of what is happening, that we have to rescue somebody or at least meet up with somebody. Perhaps it's somebody from our past and not actually our party, but more than an NPC, an actual other adventurer or hero or past hero that comes into play maybe for a scene or two and then leaves or joins up with us to go elsewhere. So my iconic adventurers or heroes for these, obviously we're starting in the village with this human fighter, and that came from the suggestion of this card that I have, and I will be building my character. This will be my character, but I need to then build him up. In the city, the dangerous, the risky city, obviously there's some kind of a thief. And in the monastery, as I have said before, my sense of my feeling about this always was the cleric. Now, I had mentioned earlier in the video this possibility of this valley also coming into play. I've kind of dropped that out right now in terms of what I'm thinking about, and focusing on this setting right here. It may come back into play, who knows? But so this is just a little structure that I have devised to remind myself of what is at play here. This is a combination of there's going to be wilderness that we're traveling through, and we may define that wilderness in some way. There's going to be an urban setting. We are obviously starting out in the village, and there is going to be the monastery. Could the monastery in the end be something that is more akin to a traditional dungeon crawl? Sure, we could end up there in a very common setting, common to RPG setting, where we have to go through a dungeon. I don't know, but I already see quite a few scenes and possibilities for this developing story. Again, without even having to committed 100% to a role set. Well, I shouldn't say 100% because in my mind I have committed to using basic fantasy, and what I started to do last night was to begin to seed or create some tables for myself that may be useful if we need to roll on a wandering monster or have some kind of encounter. I haven't finished yet, but I started with the village, and then I came across a few things that might be in quote unquote the wild. That would be perhaps the travel portion of it. And I was just basing it. I was actually watching TV and kind of just looking through and trying to bring some lower level characters in that might be wandering around a destroyed village. And I love this guy, love the art in basic fantasy. I'll say that I was partially doing it while watching TV. That this is something that I recommend, depending on the kind of person you are, of course. If I'm distracted and I'm really sort of focusing on watching TV and just very minorly, I was glancing down to see, I don't want to encounter an 8 hit die a bone golem right away. Um, it While I can't say I completely forget what I did, it's some way of maintaining an element of surprise because I don't remember necessarily what I have put there, and I'm just numbering them. I don't know if I'll get to 20 or 12, whatever it is, to have this random table at least available to me. I may not even end up using it. I also have the Basic Fantasy Field Guide, which is, of course, just more monsters, and I will probably be looking at this as well. I'm not making a huge effort to focus on what I'm doing, just to have something and to have it be more or less thematic. So I was thinking about smaller things that could be wandering around a destroyed village, as mentioned, perhaps bigger dangerous things in the wild, the Undercity. Well, I put the giant rat in the wild, but I maybe the giant rat would be in the Undercity. I saw a squirrel in New York City last weekend. That was truly the biggest squirrel I've ever seen in my life. It was absolutely incredible. And it was very adventurous, going in the playground underneath the strollers, looking for food that people had left under the strollers, and it found a bag of something, and it actually kind of opened up the bag and took stuff out and ran away. It was really incredible. Definitely a city moment. Anyway, what I might do for the Undercity, here, perhaps, is look a little more specifically and see. I don't know. I mean, that may develop based on the story that comes into play. But this is just part of the creation of something. When you're doing something semi-structured, that is the background work that can go into it. And of course, it is part of what I think people who are not interested in doing this type of gaming say is, why would I do this? Because I'm just I'm setting up the thing for myself to play, and that's absolutely true. You are building your own story, and you are acting on both sides of it. And I enjoy that, but not everybody does. Not everybody does. Just showing you, it's going off course here a little bit, showing you this D6 I picked up the other weekend in the store. I really like it. It looks like a piece of candy. It's nice. D8. All right. You can see here that we've gotten all this way. We have a character, we have a story that he is in, and we have some sense of what will be happening, yet we haven't even rolled any dice to create stats or anything like that. We're going to do that now. We're going to do that on camera so you can see how I do it, and then we will proceed. Now, per the rules of Basic Fantasy, you're rolling 3d6 in the order of the stat, and you're just assigning those rolls to the stat order, which is strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma, and there's no manipulation at all. There is a note that says, basically, if you're unhappy with your rolls, talk to your GM. Well, I'm not going to follow that for a couple of reasons. First of all, for the fighter, we must have a strength of 9 because that is a requirement of the game. So if I roll something less than 9 initially, I'm gonna have to make that a default 9. But I will roll down in the order. I'm going to bring in, however, a 4th d6. And of course, some very famous original rule sets have you rolling 4d6 and taking the highest 3. I'm going to do this for every roll to kind of simulate the fact that were I unhappy with my rolls, per the Basic Fantasy rules, I'd be talking to the GM. So this is in effect that. So we're going to be rolling 4d6. We're going to be taking the highest 3, and we will be fulfilling the requirements of having to assign those numbers in the order. So that means our first roll here is going to be for our strength. So we rolled pretty nicely, actually. I don't know if you can quite see that. So what we'll be doing on our strength is we'll be taking 14, and I will be noting that down. And next up is going to be our intelligence roll. And intelligence is 12, also 14. Well, our wisdom's going to be 12. And next up is going to be our dexterity. Hope that's high. Yes, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Nice. And constitution. Constitution, not quite. 13. And finally, our charisma. This is useful for dealing with some monsters. Also a 13. So it results in a fairly robust character doing it this way. Not, well, I'd say a fairly robust character, but a reasonable character. Not so much like everything is an 18. So that's our character, and I will apply the bonus or penalty to them, and that is going to be +1 on strength and intelligence. Wisdom gets no modifier. Dexterity is going, and charisma gets a +1. So we are, well, we're relatively strong. We're good. This is a good all-around character. This is a character who you could see would be perhaps a survivor of the desecration that occurred. I will do the rest of the filling out of the character, at least most of the rest of it, off camera and come back and show you what I have done. So we've created this character based on the picture, and we have our human fighter. He has an armor class of 19. He's got plate mail and a pole arm, and that's really all. He's a level 1 fighter, and that's really all I have given him because I'm just basing it on what I can see here. And we know the backstory that we have already. Starting out as I do, I like to give everybody a trinket, and I'm going to be rolling on the trinket table from the player's handbook. So we'll do this. This is one of my standard narrative devices. I've talked about this in pretty much every video. This may or may not come into play. It may or may not suggest something, a narrative direction, but we'll see. It's a D100 table, so we'll give this a roll right here and see what trinket he may be carrying. 62, and 62 is going to be a silver skull the size of a coin. Whoops, sorry, can't see up there. A silver skull the size of a coin. All right, well, that makes sense, at least visually, because we don't see him carrying anything. So we're going to give him this silver skull, the size of a coin, and oops, we'll see if that has any meaning for us in the story later on. And the next thing I want to do here is to go back to the Solo Adventurer's Guide that I showed you earlier and roll on a table there to get us going. There are two, okay, there's an interesting table, random word table in the back here, and it is called an ideas word cloud, and you can see here it is a roll 1d8, find the cloud according to the result, observe it for a while, and choose one random word. So that's kind of an interesting way of letting something rise up to the fore. Now, of course, it could just be the big word, but perhaps you would be focusing on, in looking at this for a little while, maybe you'd be focusing on intelligence or situation, whatever. I'm actually not going to do that here, but I like this. It's interesting. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be more conventional, basically because I want it to be a little bit more random to show you how I could fit random pieces together. These are, I think, all the same words. It's alternate tables for the word clouds, and it is a D8 and a D20 roll that you make. I put this, in fact, on the back of my laminated card, so I have it in that form too. So we're going to roll on this, and this is going to be the suggestion, the word suggestion that we will be working with as we reconsider our position in this village as to whether there's something else we need to be searching for. There isn't a person here, we established that, but there is perhaps, or it's likely that there's something else. And let's roll this up and see, does this give us any suggestion? So we rolled a 10 and a 6. So coming down to 10 and 6, sacrifice. Okay, so sacrifice is a suggestion of perhaps a theme, a concept in this story. We clearly have sacrificed. We have survived this desecration, this massacre. Perhaps we had to do some things in order to have that survival that would count as sacrifice or self-sacrifice. Perhaps the village itself has been sacrificed to a larger goal. Perhaps, I don't know. Interesting word in the context of this monastery that is in some way a goal. There is perhaps a religious aspect here, or a notion that there are forces larger than just us at work in this story. So, sacrifice, we are alone in this village, but yet there is something to search for. We are in the village, and it's time to figure out where we're going to explore. So what we need to do at a chaos level of continuing at 7, is we're still rolling on the D10, and we've got this structure here with a tower. Perhaps we will ask, should we be looking in the tower for whatever it is that we want? Is it likely we'll find something in the tower? I would say let's just give it a 50-50. So a 50-50 is going to be, just to show you what I'm referring to here. Here, 50-50 is going to be a +5 on this die roll of a 6. That's an 11. So yes, that is going to be, yes, we should be looking in the tower. So we will be entering the tower. We are aware that we may not be alone in this place. Now, what is the likelihood that there is going to be some kind of enemy inside this tower? Perhaps a remaining invader or marauder who is here. We must need to be on the alert. It's likely that somebody could be in there, so we'll give that a roll. We're at a +7, and we rolled a 10. So that is a definite yes. There is going to be somebody in here waiting for us. So now we can go to a number of different options to figure out who that might be. I had created previously a table for wilderness. I hadn't got so far as to thinking about what might happen, what type of encounter I might have in a structure. Who are the invading armies? There's a lot of different ways to go here. I would ask, actually, before I get to who are the invading armies, is who's ever waiting for me here part of that invading army? And I would say it's very likely that they are. So let's see what that is. Yes, indeed, 7 plus 8. Yes, it is there. Whoever had invaded this village is lying in wait for us in here. So that's going to be helpful to reveal to us who that army was. Now the question remains again, and here is where we come into the scenario of stepping into the other side, as it were. I have to figure out who that is. Now, it could be a random NPC of some sort. And an NPC in this case doesn't necessarily have to be like a cleric. It could be still a monster because we could have invading orcs or whatever. But where am I going to get that information from? And let me show you some options for that. Actually, before I get to that, I need to do something that is important here, which is to make the chaos roll. As a reminder, what happens is we're going into a new scene, and in order to introduce some narrative uncertainty for the new scene, we do the chaos roll. The chaos roll is going to be based on the chaos level of the new scene, and our chaos level has risen now from 7 to 8 because there's more uncertainty. We're entering into a situation where where our expectation is that there is somebody remaining from the invading armies, perhaps, and so we have a little more uncertainty. So we're going up a level, and instead of this D10, we'll be rolling a D12 for the chaos roll. The chaos roll is going to determine something about the scene. Will it be what is happening as planned? So in this case, the plan is, or the expectation is, that we'll be encountering some type of warrior or something else happening. So let's do this chaos roll now and then see. We got a 5. A 5, abjuration, remove something from the scene. Interesting. And a little more description of that in the book. The dice release abjuration magic in this roll to banish something from the scene. Review the scene by removing some element from it, something that is supposed to be present and is no longer anymore. Well, interesting, because our scene in this case is entering into this, perhaps it's a storehouse, I don't know, with a tower there, a guardhouse, with the expectation that there would be somebody there guarding it. It seems a little counterintuitive to just say, well, no, now there is nobody there. But this leaves me with a narrative conundrum. Yet I decide to walk in, and my what this suggests to me narratively is that rather than there being an enemy lying in wait for me, instead of the enemy lying in wait, what there is the corpse of an enemy who is there. What I have removed from the expectation is the actual life in the body of the enemy. The enemy is still there, but it is a corpse. It is perhaps a spirit. Perhaps it is a sacrificial corpse. Who knows? So we enter the room. We enter this. I keep feeling like it's a storehouse. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a guardhouse and a storehouse. Maybe there are food items here. Maybe there are also arms here. We're not necessarily here for any of that, but perhaps the invading, the remnant of the invading army was here to try to get some loot or get some food or restore his health, and instead he passed away and his remains are here. So what we are encountering now are the remains and perhaps the spirit of the invader. I want to stick as close as I can to basic fantasy. So, to try to figure out the likelihood of what might have invaded this village, I'm going to stick to the wilderness encounters tables provided by the book. And looking at this village here, we see some woods, forest in the background. So, I'm going to go to the woods or forest area. Now, of course, um, whatever is here might not have been native to the area where we are dealing with some sort of active invasion, and they could have been sent by somebody, but we're going to roll on this table. It's a 2d8 table to see, nevertheless, based on this wilderness table, what this might be. And we rolled a 5, and a 5 is an orc. So we are facing an orc corpse in this storeroom here. And before we get too far, I want to investigate, or excuse me, I want to see the likelihood of our success at searching this corpse and doing investigation. And to do that, I'm going to rely on a couple of things. I'm going to rely, first of all, on our intelligence modifier here, which is a +1. And I'm going to be going to this arbitrary difficulty number scale chart that I have. Now, this comes from a different system. This comes from a system. I've done a video on Masterbook, which I absolutely love. And I have a copy of this chart. You've probably seen me use this in other videos, but I just want to show you. Oh God, I really need to reproduce this differently, because what we have here is not only the difficulty number value, but there gives you the percent chance of success, and I find this easier to conceptualize. So um, entering into this now vacant storeroom or guardhouse, we see a corpse of an orc, and we need to search this corpse, investigate the spirit of it, or try to assess what's going on here, and how easy is this going to be for us to do. Well, it's certainly going to be at a minimum complicated, I think. Complicated to difficult. I think it's going to be difficult to do. So our number here on the difficult is 12. So what we're going to be doing is rolling our d20 and adding our intelligence modifier, which is going to be a 1. And we're looking for a 12 or greater to overcome. We roll an 18. That's a strong success. +1 is a 19. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this success chart. And the success chart is it's useful to use because it gives you a little more narrative direction. So we came up with a 19, and that is a 7 more than we needed for a success. So we can look here to, we got a better than needed with possible benefits to our search based on this criteria. And that also comes from Masterbook, and I'll just show you. There is a page in here that gives you even a little more of an indication of what these mean. So, well, this just basically says the same thing. The results were better than necessary in most cases, and there may be added benefits. So as we approach the orc corpse to search it and look around, we have some sense that we're going to have a benefit to our search based on this rolling that we've done. What do we know about orcs? Well, we know that they're wild, they're corrupt, they're disorganized. They tend to rule by intimidation and threat. They don't tend not to command large nations, so there's not going to be some large orc nation somewhere. They're chaotic and evil. The basic fantasy rule set tells us that orcs are a 1 to 2 on a 1d6 of orcs could be an orc shaman, and this comes from the basic fantasy rules here on monsters, and that would be in a lair, it specifies. However, this is not obviously an orc lair, but nevertheless, because we got that roll that told us we might learn a little bit more about, here's the orc entry, we might learn a little bit more about orcs, or learn about the situation, get some benefit. We're going to go with that and say, let's just do this one to this D6 roll and see if we get a 1 or a 2, this would be an orc shaman corpse. And actually, see, I can't seem to roll on camera. He actually got a 1. So this is an orc shaman corpse, but really in examining it, it doesn't tell us much more than there is some connection here between this invasion and this monastery here, that there's some connection. This is an orc cleric corpse, and we know from what story we established that we have some connection here to a cleric that is perhaps one of our party, perhaps has been corrupted by the invading orcs. We don't know. But this one tells us there is some connection there. We're not going to get much more out of this orc because based on the rule set here, it's telling us that, for example, the treasure types here, Q and R, it's not in a layer. Q and R treasure tables just give us essentially nothing or some gold, but we're not interested in gold, so we're not even going to bother with a search. We're going to be now leaving the village with the knowledge that we have as opposed to some particular treasure and moving out into the forest, the paths toward the Undercity. As we exit the desecrated village into the forest, the path on the forest area, we're going to do a chaos roll and remind ourselves that our current chaos level is at 8, which is a D12. So we're going to take our D12 and make the chaos roll and see if anything on our way to the city, something is happening. A 3, no, nothing is happening. So we're continuing along this pathway and wandering in and among the woods toward the Undercity. The woods are calm, almost too calm. We follow a well-trodden path until around the bend we see the outskirts of a city and come face to face with the city gates. I'm going to take this opportunity to stop here because I think it's a good point to show how a story with possibility has really been created. When we get to the city gates, there are many different options about what could happen, the type of reception that we would get, the type of condition that we would find the city in, and using just very basic questions and answers coming from this solo adventurer's guide and this destiny check mechanic, the chaos roll. So the next thing that I would be doing if I was following this perhaps would be, it's a new scene, I'm rolling, I'm doing a chaos roll again to see if something might change, and if so, what that might be. We didn't even get to explore the fact that you could potentially get negative event focus or a positive or neutral event focus, and this is yet a further direction in what could happen. So we could, for example, bring in an NPC based on this. This kind of branching system gives a lot of guidance. The other thing that I was hoping to show you is the way in which using board game apparatus, that in this case I had this map from World of Warcraft, and I also pulled in my character. So my character was really created not from the stats of the rules, but really from this visual picture that I had, and this together with this portion of the map started to create the story for me. And in fact, I did not even select the rules that I was going to be using until the end. When I started the video, I thought maybe I would go with some basic D&D, and in the end, I went with basic fantasy instead. This whole thing could have played out in any number of types of rule sets, and the reason why is because it started with a story that was independent of stats. It came from some visual interpretation that I was doing with the board game materials that I had, combined with the use of a narrative guide to answering questions, a kind of narrative oracle device that comes from this Solo Adventurer's Guide. So I hope you enjoyed this little look inside one way of beginning to create a story. And as always, thanks for watching.